Welcome to Newslaundry Chhota Hafta. For the full episode, subscribe because it is behind the paywall and only subscribers get access to uncut, complete content. Newslaundry Hafta is our weekly wrap of all that made the news, all that didn't, and all that should have, and all that shouldn't have. We agree, we disagree, we critique, and occasionally we beat each other up. But it's all good fun. Subscribe. This is a Newslaundry podcast, and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. I'm back. I'm going to be your host this week too because Abhinandan is in Bombay and he's going to be back on Sunday. So from next week you're going to listen to his soothing voice giving you the news and discussion. Meanwhile you have to suffer me for this week again. We have a very action-packed week. Prime Minister Modi is in the US. And that's what we're going to be discussing mostly for this episode because it's really all over the news and it's quite a remarkable visit. We're going to have with us in-house, Anand is in traffic, so he's going to join us in a bit. He's got stuck in Delhi traffic. We have with us Raman Kirpal, who's in the studio. Hi, Raman sir. We have Jayashree joining us from Chennai.
Hi, hello.
And we have Suhasini Haidar joining us from Delhi. Hi, Suhasini.
Hi, Manisha. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Suhasini is Diplomatic Affairs Editor with The Hindu. And she regularly writes on foreign policy issues. You've heard her before on Hafta many times. She hosts a weekly online show called Worldview with Suhasini Haidar. So if you don't want news like Modi ji ka danka baj raha hai ya Biden ne kitni baar hug kiya, then you must tune into her YouTube show. It's on The Hindu, right? The Hindu YouTube channel.
That's right. It's on The Hindu's YouTube channel. And if you want to read the show rather than watch it, the whole transcript is on The Hindu online, the website.
Great. So we're going to be talking about a lot of things with Suhasini, important world affairs. Before we get into the headlines, a couple of announcements. We have a press freedom fund that is up. We've raised about 17 lakh so far, but we need to raise 30 lakh. So please contribute. Please tell your friends and family to also contribute. This fund is going to be, it's basically an NL Sena project. It'll include deep dive reports, commentaries and videos on press freedom, the health of media ecosystem and pressures faced by civil society and media in India. I think it's a very important story, especially in the run up to 2024. It's not just going to be, one or two odd reports. It's really going to be a 360-degree view and audit of sorts. So do contribute to our press freedom fund and help us top it up. Jayashree, can we get the headlines and then we'll get straight into the discussion?
Yes. Here's the headlines of the week. So yes, biggest news story is Prime Minister Narendra Modi has landed in America. He was in New York late Tuesday, marking the beginning of his first state visit to the US. So he did yoga in NYC. He met Elon Musk, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He had dinner with the Bidens and he has a state dinner tonight. There's also a rare press conference scheduled where Modi is expected to take 2 questions. There's also been some opposition that we've seen. 75 Democrats have written a letter and the Committee to Protect Journalists took out a full-page ad in the Washington Post on press freedom issues in India.
In fact, the press conference, a CNN article says that the Indian side wasn't very keen on the press conference, but they were kind of convinced and then they said that, okay, just 2 questions.
Yeah, they apparently said they wanted to do joint statements, but they were overruled.
So Modi ji is finally in a press conference in the US.
I think it's the first since 2014.
Yeah. And
Well, not exactly, but we can talk about that in a bit.
Okay.
So the makers of Adipurush announced that they will rewrite portions of the dialogue and issue new versions of the film. This is after it got intense criticism. I think protests were also held in parts of Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra and Delhi against the film.
And the movie is bombed now. Now there are reports of it just not doing well.
Yeah, I think 6 days still on a slide.
But normally when the controversy happens, the movie also does well.
Like with Kerala Story, it started doing really well. But I mean, that also got a lot of BJP push. And here you can see everyone's protesting against it. At least the Sangh affiliates, VHP and all.
Yeah, Sangh affiliates hate it. They're putting up pictures of themselves, like tearing up their tickets, cancelling their bookings.
And this Manoj Muntasir guy is also quite a number because I'm seeing some of his previous interviews where he's talking about, he's I think in Jashner Ekta and he's talking about how his father was a Shiv worshipper or a Vaishnavite, either of the two, and how he used to, recite the Quran every time he would recite some chant, some Vedic chant, and he would challenge him. I don't know, like very strange stuff he said before. And now 360-degree turn.
In other news, 80 people have died at the district hospital in Uttar Pradesh's Valia since June 15th. These are due to health complications caused by a heat wave. In the latest from Manipur, Union Home Minister Amit Shah has convened an all-party meeting on June 24th to discuss the situation in the state. This will take place in Delhi. Meanwhile, Sonia Gandhi also issued an appeal for peace, urged women to take the lead in restoring normalcy. In Bengal, 9 people have died so far, violence preceding the Panchayat poll. The latest death was on June 20th. It was a CPIM youth activist who succumbed to bullet injuries. The Calcutta High Court this week ordered the State Election Commission to deploy 82,000 Central Forces personnel during the election. The election will take place on July 8th.
And Supreme Court endorsed this decision as well because the state government had gone against it.
Yeah. The Congress has said the centre's decision to award the Gandhi Peace Prize for 2021 to Gita Press is a travesty. Gita Press is one of the largest publishers of Hindu religious texts.
In fact, Akshay Mukul is going to be on Charcha. So in case you're Hindi listeners, you can tune into Charcha and he can give you a very deep background on Gita Press.
Yeah. So Punjab this week passed an amendment to the Sikh Gurudwaras Act to ensure the free transmission of Gurbani from the Golden Temple. This has been opposed by the Shiromani Akali Dal because broadcast rights are owned by a private channel belonging to the Badal family. And finally, there's been a huge media outcry over a submersible called Titan that went missing on Sunday with 5 people on board. They were on their way to visit the submerged Titanic. Simultaneously, about 81 migrants died, with hundreds missing when their boat sank off the coast of Greece. At least 300 of them are reported to be from Pakistan. I have a little rant about this, which I can do later.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So basically, there's been excellent reportage about, so this submersible, the 5 people on board include 2 Pakistanis. One is a billionaire, the other is the son. So there's been excellent reportage on how the company that operates the submersible, it's called Ocean Gate, it sort of egregiously ignored multiple warnings about its experimental nature. It pretended to have been inspected and certified. It even vanished last year for 5 hours during a trip. At least 3 dozen people warned of catastrophic consequences in a letter, I think it was in 2018. But all of this was ignored because what was more important was rushing to provide tourism for our world's billionaires. And then you also, of course, obviously with the migrant disaster taking place at the same time, it's inevitable that you compare and contrast like how the media looks at it. The ship that took them to their deaths was stranded for days in Italy without government help. But in the North Atlantic, when the submersible vanished, US and Canadian agencies, navies, deep sea firms, commercial private firms have all been working together. I think the entire rescue operation is based in Boston. So like it's also, Ishan Tharoor had a very good piece on this, like how it's the story of 2 Pakistans. When you're looking at the billionaire and his son on board the Titan, in contrast with the hundreds of Pakistanis. But obviously, I mean, I understand why this gets media attention, but it's also repulsive. It's an unusual story. And what is unusual is news. Like, it's like that old saying, if a dog bites a man, it's not news. If the man bites the dog, that is your headline. So,
but the 81 migrants are all Pakistanis?
Yeah, Pakistan has said 300 of the people who were on board the ship were from Pakistan. Yeah.
Sad.
So yes, that's my rant, and those are the headlines for the
Thank you for the rant and the headline.
Yes.
So Suhasini, why don't you just tell us a little bit about this press conference? Because you said that it's not quite a press conference. That's what you were trying to say?
No, I was trying to say that it's not the first time he has taken questions from the press while abroad. Of course, I think the point that he has not held those press conferences in India at all is, at least a political press conference is absolutely true. The exceptions, and that's why it's so rare that he's going to take these questions in the United States with President Biden, is that the exceptions have been, he did stand with President Obama when he came to Delhi. And I think they took one question each, and Mr. Modi was asked about climate change or something. He did also in the UK actually answer questions from the press. This was in November 2015. And that's when I think he decided that he wouldn't take any more of these, simply because the questions were very pointed and extremely negative. He was asked about India's human rights records. He was asked about his own record in Gujarat. He was asked about the fact that the UK government did not want him to travel there after the riots and that sort of thing. So he had answers to those at the time. He said, India is the land of Buddha, India is the land of Gandhi. But after that, we found and we heard from dignitaries and diplomats from other countries saying that he has absolutely refused to take any more press conferences. He did in 2018 in Berlin, did take questions, and I was there, so it was actually quite funny because there were 4 journalists from newspapers covering the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Berlin that year. And we were told that he doesn't want to take questions, but the same thing, that he's going to take one question each. But that question wasn't given to any of the journalists present in the room, even though we had our hands up and everything. It was handed to the camera person for Doordarshan. I'm not quite sure who all will be there. I assume that everyone is accredited to the White House already, like the reporters for I think the Hindustan Times and PTI are certainly over there, will be allowed in. But whether any of the visiting press will be allowed in or not, I'm not sure. It has changed over the years. I think after 2014, the White House has been told to sort of keep the visiting press out from India. So it's normally just a few people who are already accredited.
There's that one Indian origin journalist who's very well known for giving softball questions, right, in the White House. Raghubir Goyal, I think.
Yeah, I think Mr. Goyal is there. I mean, there are a few who are always sort of seen as, sort of batting for their side. You have similarly a Pakistani journalist who does the same thing, always ask a question that seems... and Mr. Goyal is known for his questions about India on practically every issue. You can be discussing US-Germany ties and he'll say, but what's in it for India?
And I think the Hindu had an excellent story. I remember reading it long back on how Goyal has now become a verb in the White House.
Yes.
How White House representatives will look towards him hoping that he'll rescue them with a softball question.
That's right. Well, I mean, he is an institution.
On to the state visit, Suhasini. I guess my question to you would be that even if you don't go by all the crazy hype that we see on television news, the wooing of India by US over the past few weeks has been quite unprecedented. You had, the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Secretary of State, and the Defense Secretary come to India and detail Modi's trip. There's a $500 million military equipment and technology package on the table that includes jet engines, tech transfers. You've had a private family dinner at Biden's home, and today you have the state dinner. So what is behind this intense wooing?
Well, Manisha, I do agree with you about the wooing. I'm not sure I would agree that officials coming here in advance of the visit are proof of that, because if you have a state visit, then obviously there are going to be officials going back and forth, making sure that every detail is in place so that when the Prime Minister comes, it's all like clockwork. And we've had Indian officials go there as well. After all, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval was there back in January, preparing for the ISET part of this visit. We've had the Prime Minister's Principal Secretary, P.K. Mishra, go to Washington. Again, very unusual to have the Prime Minister's Principal Secretary going there, but there was a photograph of him with the Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, so a lot of speculation over that. So they are obviously putting in place all the things you need for that visit.
To go smoothly.
But I do think that this is an important visit for the United States. They've made it clear that they want to see India much closer to them. If the deal that is on the table right now, and let's remember, there have been deals in the past that have been announced with a lot of fanfare, right from the nuclear deal in 2005, and then, all that followed. Then in 2015, again, there was an announcement that the nuclear deal is done and that American companies would now come and make reactors in India, to other things like this jet engine deal itself. Some version of it has been on the table since 2010. But if this deal happens this time, it's significant because it shows that the US is willing to make an exception for India when it comes to the transfer of technology, because India has been insisting that none of these American deals make as much sense to us unless we can actually make them in India, because India is not just looking to export, but India as a market as well.
I don't think they will in much form sort of influence conversations that actual politicians have with each other, but it's good to see. I mean, even if you're just seeing those trucks wandering around in New York City, or I think the full page ad, things like that are impactful in smaller ways. And it's sort of important to see that kind of pushback. For me personally, but with Modi, I feel I feel like, okay, this is my pet theory in which I think he suffers from a serious case of Nehru envy. So, like, I mean, you look at the Nehru Museum fiasco, removing his name, converting it into a Prime Minister museum. But I feel like his entire philosophy is motivated by this. And we see it especially when he goes abroad. Because whether you like him or not, whether you agree with him or not, an undeniable sort of aspect of Nehru was that he was a genuine global figure, right? He was someone who was known across the world at the time. He was respected, he was loved. You look at things like the ticker tape parade he had in New York about Truman and JFK breaking protocol as presidents to meet him at the airport, his meetings with Einstein, and so on. But yet that was still somewhat organic, like people of great profile or intellect coming together. But I think what Modi tries to do is recreate like a cut piece facsimile of that whole experience.
I think the narrative, the most important narrative for Modi and his government is that India is Vishwa Guru. This is something that they are setting it for 2024, apart from the communal divide, whatever they do for that. So keeping that narrative in mind, I think this US visit becomes very important for him. And as Suhasini has given 3 very good reasons, maybe a small reason could be the diaspora voters are equally important for the US government.
But Raman, I do want to make a point over there, because so much is made of the Indian diaspora, and there's no question that the foreign leaders that Prime Minister Modi is meeting are really impressed, not just with the size of these gatherings of diaspora, but also the fact is that the Indian diaspora has a great reputation around the world of being non-political, but of really, or certainly not getting into trouble, quote unquote, but of, education, of being professionals, of being there in every walk of life as educated people. And so when there is an opportunity like Prime Minister Modi's diaspora rallies, like we just saw in Australia, or Howdy Modi, to bring all of them into a room together and have them listen to both the leaders, it's always a temptation for the foreign leader that, maybe I can get some of this Indian American vote as a result. But, we looked at a lot of these elections, certainly before, because there was a kind of lull in the diaspora events, certainly because of COVID and other reasons. But before that, if you looked at the diaspora event, yes, the diaspora would come to listen to Prime Minister Modi. And of course, they were connected to India. But there was no indicator that Indian Americans or Indian Australians or Indian, even the UK Indians or, any of the others had actually voted for the person in power. And Trump was a great example of that, because eventually Trump didn't get too many of the Indian American votes, despite the fact that he held 2 public rallies.
And despite the Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar.
But Raman's right. There's always the temptation that the diaspora is actually bringing you votes. Also, it's a prosperous diaspora, so it's bringing you campaign funding as well. Interesting, Raman. I think you're referring to the fact that China has put a block again on a terrorist, Sajid Mir, who's on the UN banned list. And he's China's put another block on that. And that's an ongoing thing with China. They've done it with about 6 other cases where India has wanted to put people on the banned list and have not succeeded because China puts a block on it. And sometimes China agrees, like they agreed with Masood Azhar in 2019. But you were talking about India's relationship with this neighborhood. I think if you put Pakistan aside, because India right now has no relationship with Pakistan at that level, there is no question that the Modi government has gone from trying to be the big brother and at times getting pushed back to now trying to really forge good relations with its neighbors when it comes to connectivity, when it comes to trade, when it comes to things like power sharing and inland water channels and all the rest. So I'd say Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives have all seen some kind of outreach from India. And each of those cases, there's been a pushback on certain things. For example, the Maldives pushed back way back when India made comments about the democracy over there, and wanted the president at the time to take emergency off. Sri Lanka, there's been constant pushbacks until they got into their current crises. So all of them have had issues with India, this of a big brother sort of issue with India. You saw it most recently with Nepal and that Akhand Bharat map. But there's no question that having seen the importance of the neighborhood, I think the government has taken a lot of steps when it comes to reaching out with, as I said, all this trade and connectivity and power sharing issues. And I think those are the more long-term solutions for whatever problems one might have in the neighborhood, because political problems between countries will always remain, particularly when one country's size is so much bigger than the other.
So in this global order, it seems from a lot of the coverage and the way exactly how the US has been wooing us that the US needs us more than we need them. Is that a correct assessment? And if that is a correct assessment, how can we leverage it?
What has happened is that there are two things in recent, say, 12 months, far longer time, but that US and India are in a position of complex interdependence, and that's the fancy word that they use in international relations. Robert Ewen coined it, and there was one more scholar. So complex interdependence still defines their relationship, and in last year or so, if the pivotal event in international relations has been Ukraine war, so US increasingly understands that India has delinked itself from the consequences of where it stands. It has in a way de-risked itself from the position it takes.
In the sense, can you?
In the sense means neither of the two or multiple, not two. So multiple powers can have a lot of elbow room with India on that. So India can place its strategic autonomy and pursue whatever it wants. So it has de-risked itself from the consequences of what it decides to do. So also something interesting, I don't know whether it should be taken into account, also happened in last few weeks, that during Rahul Gandhi's visit, he was quite clear about that even if Congress was in power, it would have taken the same stand. He said it, and
Same stand with regard to?
Ukraine war.
Okay.
Means not be very openly critical or taken a side in the war, and of course it would have wanted, just like the present government's formal statement is, that a peaceful resolution and end of the military conflict, but it would not have taken side, and India has a very special kind of relationship with Russia. So Rahul Gandhi also said, so US understands that there is a continuity in foreign policy, and it has a bipartisan support also. So even the domestic political capital in India cannot be influenced with exertion of any pressure or on something.
All of you listening in, the Chhota Hafta, do subscribe so you can listen to the entire Hafta. We will see you again next week with the Hafta. Till then, subscribe, pay to keep news free, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Thank you. Goodbye.
All the Newslaundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to Newslaundry. Help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs, and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Sun liya Afrika, mufat khoro. Not to brag or anything, but Newslaundry Hafta features in the top 50 in the world on SoundCloud in the news and politics category for podcasts. So do subscribe and see what you're missing, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Subscribe, help keep news independent and free. All Newslaundry podcasts are available on iTunes and Stitcher and any other podcast platform.